a witness to make sure mobile phones are completely turned off, please, for the duration of the meeting. Just for the information of the meeting, Deputy O'Sullivan will be substituting for Deputy Pringle, and Deputy Aylward will be substituting for Deputy McConalogue. The meeting is being convened today for the purpose of consideration of the Greyhound Bill 2018. I'd like to welcome Minister of State from the Department of Agriculture and Marine, Mr Andrew Doyle TD, and his officials come here today. We will now proceed with the consideration of the bill and we'll try and get it through it as quickly as possible. A grouping list has been circulated for the information of members. I presume every member has a copy of that, have they? Just Deputy, want to just give us a second, Deputy Kennedy. Deputy Cahill, have you got a copy? Yeah. Deputy Penrose, are you?
Give me a hard copy.
I had, but I haven't now.
Deputy Penrose got a hard copy there as well.
Give me a hard copy, I won't complain either.
Okay. Just to remind members in the committee that the bill will be considered, must be considered section by section. So we'll try and get through it as quickly as possible. So section by section. Okay. We all okay? Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll commence. So we'll start with section 1. Any member want to comment on section 1? Okay, if there's nobody who wants to comment on section 1, I put the question. Section 1 stands part of the bill. Agreed? Okay, thank you. Section 2. Amendments from Deputy O'Sullivan, Pringle, Wallace and Daly. Amendments 1, 5, 6, 10 and 11 form a composite proposal and will be discussed together. Deputy O'Sullivan.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to introduce these amendments at this stage. And
sorry, Deputy, I have to get you to move the
I move the amendments, yeah. Do I mention them all? The numbers are...
Just one. Amendment
right.
1 initially.
1, 5, 6, 10 and 11. Which
we'll discuss them all together,
yeah.
all right?
Yeah, that's okay. So, can start?
Yeah, carry on,
right,
sorry. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to open with a few general remarks regarding the issue because they're the context in which the amendments were submitted. And it's notwithstanding those greyhound owners who look after their greyhounds, including when they're no longer able to race and including when they don't bring in the prize money. But the reality is that we have too many examples of appalling cruelty to greyhounds, and the Animal Welfare Bill, for various reasons, has not been addressing that. So we have an opportunity now with this bill to get the issue of greyhound welfare right. And of course there is an irony that we have a ban on the use of wild animals for entertainment purposes in circuses, which is great, but yet we have the greyhound as a domestic, not a wild animal, being used for so-called entertainment in places like Macau, Pakistan and in China. And unfortunately, it wasn't the greyhound industry in Ireland who are highlighting this or trying to do something about it. It was really the animal welfare groups. And in spite of that, greyhounds continued to end up in Macau, in China and in Pakistan, and that's the reality. And we have the proof of that. The same few names of Irish greyhound breeders recurring on a Chinese database. And copies of stud books are uploaded showing greyhounds that were previously registered to race in Ireland but presently advertised as breeding material in China. We have details of 41 Irish greyhounds who have been uploaded to this Chinese site. They face extreme cruelty in those countries. I met a couple of the lucky ones who were rescued and who were brought back to Ireland. I know I've had various questions on this, and I know, as the Minister outlined to me in a PQ, the responsibility of Bord na Gán for governance, regulation, development of the industry. They don't support the export of greyhounds to destinations which don't conform with standards in the Animal Health and Welfare Act, Welfare of Greyhounds Act, etc. And the Minister agrees with that. But yes, the reality is what's happening. And my amendments and the amendments from my colleagues are to try and put a stop to that. While the vast majority of Irish greyhounds are going to the UK, of course there's issues around Brexit and what will happen in that. We know the dogs going to the EU, they're governed by EU law, but we do know that EU countries are being used as transit countries. And I mean, that's the reality. So just looking at the amendments that we have brought in. So Amendment 1, the emphasis is on welfare. and it's to include the International Greyhound Forum in conjunction with Oireachtas Con Éireann, or its new title, to have a role in this on what prescription, what constitutes sound exports and problem exports. You know, and it's the welfare groups that pick up the pieces when the racing dogs no longer have a commercial value. And with decreasing attendances at greyhound meetings, we know that there are financial issues here, and perhaps financial necessity might lead some owners to do what has been happening, what we know has been happening. On Amendment 2, and it is to make it an offence to export greyhounds to countries outside the EU. And I mean, that explains, I've just explained what that was about. And part two is
Amendment 5 you mean,
Amendment 5, sorry, beg your pardon.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, yeah, sorry, I have it down a second.
Okay,
That's Amendment 5 I'm talking about, to countries outside the EU. And part 2 is taking out the transit question, because we know that countries are being used in transit. And while it will be hard to police, there's no doubt about that, I think the fact that we are acknowledging that it is a problem, I think that is important, because it's sending out a message that Ireland is not accepting the practice of exporting dogs bred in Ireland to countries, to places like Macau and Pakistan and to China, so that they can be traced back then to the Irish breeder, because organisations have traced dozens of dogs in Pakistan and China and Macau back here to Ireland. The next one, amendment, is about the offences, fines and prison terms. It's to create really an environment whereby the trainer will know the consequences if he does engage in exporting to countries where there is no animal welfare and no concerns for the greyhounds. And it's really hopefully a deterrent to those trainers who export their greyhounds to those places knowingly. And of course we know that they're doing it for profit. So the fines and the sentences have to be a real deterrent. The next amendment, it's giving the Minister the power to amend the white list on an annual basis. And that's really allowing for change, because some countries abroad may introduce animal welfare regulations. So it's giving them a chance to come off the white list. And equally, countries that are supposedly in favour of animal welfare can go off the list if they are shown to be breaching them. It would also mean we'd have figures on exports, the amount of dogs, where they're going, etc., because that's obviously crucial, because at the moment we're depending on independent sources in order to get the information on this. So this is putting the onus on the Minister and the Department. I don't think those amendments are draconian in any way, and I would stress again that they are about the welfare of dogs. And if we are taking the welfare seriously, well then we will do all we can to ensure that Irish greyhounds do not end up in countries where there is appalling breach of animal welfare, where there's no animal welfare in quite a number of them. So I just believe if there's a genuine care for greyhounds, there won't be a problem with these amendments, because you know, I hear owners telling me all the time how much they love their greyhounds. So here's an opportunity to show that and to put it into action. The other point I'd like to make, I don't have it as an amendment at this stage, so I'll look at it later, is why the registration of greyhounds has to be through the coursing club. Because we know that there are greyhound owners who do not want their dogs, they don't take part in coursing, but yet that's where the registration fee goes. And I'm sure the greyhound industry could do it more funding, as we know, because attendances are going down at meetings. So I've just introduced them there, and I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you, Chair.
Deputy, any other members? Deputy Penrose?
Yeah, I think you know, this is a very important bill from a number of perspectives. Cahill, probity, integrity, funding, governance, and of course the welfare issues surrounding or relating to greyhounds themselves, to name but a few. And of course the central objective of the bill is to root out the neglect and cruelty in the industry by way of an emphasis on welfare. And I did say at the second stage debate on behalf of the Labour Party that we need to implement a detailed list of appropriate countries for the licensed export of greyhounds from the state, and of which these exports would be permissible. I think I was always concerned about the number of dogs that were exported and the destination of exports, and the necessity to have appropriate and proper welfare regimes in place. And I recall at the pre-legislative scrutiny phase, Chairperson, and indeed maybe it was during the time that Minister Doyle, maybe in your predecessor, that there were some presentations indicating that there were significant concerns about the record of some of these destination exports. I think Dog Trust in particular. And I support broad trust the amendments, but I do appreciate, and probably the Minister will come back and tell us that the problem is that if we implement the amendments this evening and pass them, that would be fine and dandy from our perspective, but it's the implementation of it when they go elsewhere, and how do we control that? That's going to be the big issue, and I'm sure there's going to be a huge legal complexity attached to that. And you know, I'm in support of it, but I can see the issue why the minister may well have difficulties. I hope he hasn't, because he has worked hard at this bill over a number of years, and I acknowledge that as officials. I did express the view on behalf of the Labour Party that this aspect of the welfare issue was not adequately addressed in the bill, and it was a significant shortcoming by any standards. But there is a significant input of taxpayers' money to the industry, and therefore we have to make sure that all aspects of the industry is above reproach from the perspective of integrity, probity, governance, sanctions and the welfare of the animals. So the exports of unwanted greyhounds to places like Macau and other places are a matter of concern, you know, and I think we've seen programmes that illustrated that. Some of the breeding establishments in China and elsewhere appear to have little or no animal welfare provision. But you know, I think we need a detailed register, as Deputy Sullivan says, of precisely where the greyhounds are being exported to. I think we certainly can start at that. And when we export to hopefully reputable EU countries, there's a regime involved that we're aware of there in those countries, overarching and rightly onerous. And we do have the microchips, and we have the vaccination programmes and whatever supervision is required, other things like the passport regime now and everything. But it's what happens when it goes to there that we have to try and address. I think we have to salute the work, Cahill, of the rescue agencies who have valiantly looked after abandoned greyhounds with little or no help or resource-wise from the state. But I think, in fairness, the Minister again has moved to address that in the course of the Shannon amendments, and we welcome that. I think, and I did note that there's an amendment, I think, dealing with the collection of data in the Shannon as well. I think maybe I misread the bill. I thought there was something in the bill that which permits the gathering of export data was accepted. But my colleague Deputy Bruhan, I think, introduced the Welfare of Greyhound Amendment Bill 2017, which was aimed at controlling the export of greyhounds and for the publication of a white list of countries to which export of greyhounds under licence will be permissible. And it made an offence there along the lines of Deputy O'Sullivan to export greyhounds to countries not on the white list. And I met with the personnel of the Dogs Trust myself, and I must say we're excellent ambassadors for their organisation and we're very well informed. And of course they are members of the International Greyhound Forum, as I understand it. But Minister, you know, the amendments are obviously very well intentioned and well focused and well constructed, if I might say so. And I've no doubt that if you could see your way, you'd like to implement them, and I would be supportive of them. But I'd be interested to hear what the Minister has to say as to how to ensure that they be implemented at the destination. You know, and because as far as I see, you know, if some dog can be exported from here to one of those places, they can also be exported from some of the other EU countries to some of the other places, and that's an issue. I think that's the bloody problem, is how to resolve that. And I think we probably may well have to tackle it at an EU level, and perhaps Irish government might lead the way in that regard.
Thanks, Deputy Cahill. Next, please.
Thank you, Chairman. And first of all, at the outset, I'd just like to declare that I am a director of a private greyhound track, so I have a vested interest in this industry. You know, first of all, I welcome the bill, and I suppose we've been waiting for this bill for a long period of time. And I think, you know, the integrity of the industry, and you know, making sure that it stands up to the highest scrutiny, I think has to be paramount. And I think this bill goes a long ways to addressing a lot of the difficulties we have been experiencing. And I think, you know, in particular, you know, the image out there that dogs are running with prohibited substances in their bloodstream, and that you know, either are drugs for enhancing performance or ones for reducing performance, as was the case in a high-profile case there that and the board had on a Derby fine like there a number of years ago. But I think it's absolutely essential that, you know, if we have this bill enacted, that if there's anyone found using a substance, a prohibited substance of any whether it is for enhancing performance or slowing down a greyhound, that they face the full rigours of the law and that they are, able to be suspended and dealt with adequately. That hasn't been the case up to now, and I think it has damaged the industry, and that has to be put right. And I think it is, from my viewpoint, I think it is one of the reasons why this bill has been so urgent to get it through the houses of the Oireachtas. And it's absolutely essential that when it is done, that it does what it says in the tin, and that if people fail a test post racing, that post the race or at any time in the dog and his race life, whether it is in the kennels or wherever, that the full rigours of the regulations can be brought to bear. So I think I welcome the provisions in the bill that are addressing those issues. On the on dog welfare, I think this bill does address dog welfare, and I think there has to be a recognition that both the board and dog owners are putting money into dog welfare, and this is ever increasing. And rehoming of greyhounds after their racing life is becoming a priority of the industry, and it's something where there's an awful lot of work being done. And Deputy Penrose, talked about the dog trust there. It is a recognised fact now that greyhounds make good pets, and they are being exported to different countries around the world, and a significant number of dogs are finding new homes. I think the amendments that are before us now, I think in practicality, I don't think we can enforce these amendments, and I think we're making presumptions about different countries about the conditions that dogs are kept in there. And I think while some people might say dogs, you could pick an isolated incident in this country, and we had one there lately with a puppy farm where dogs were held in very poor conditions. And if we presented that as the way that dogs are cared for in Ireland, it would be a very misrepresentative picture. And the vast majority of whether they be greyhounds or dogs in this country are kept in very good conditions. And I think we can't make assumptions about other countries. And the fact is, the vast majority of our dogs are exported to the UK, and they are outside the jurisdiction of this state then when they are exported to the UK. So I think trying to put restrictions on what the UK do, I don't think is practical or can be done at any rate, and that's even before we have the problems of Brexit. So while I accept that these amendments are well intentioned, I think the fact that this bill is going a long ways to addressing welfare in the industry of dogs in the whole industry, I think that has to be respected. And I think this bill is very much focused on the welfare of dogs, and I think there is a recognition in the industry that welfare and the importance of welfare wasn't probably as high in the agenda in the past as it should have been, but I think that fact is well recognised now. And for the industry to thrive going forward and to drive on into the future, it has to show that the welfare of greyhounds is one of their utmost priority, and to ensure that dogs, when they're finished racing or finished breeding, are well cared for. So that would be my view on these amendments, Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy. Any other members want to comment? Deputy O'Sullivan wants to come back in before I go to the Minister. Is that okay? Deputy O'Sullivan?
Yeah, just a couple of points there. I'm not making any assumptions or presumptions about China and Macau and Pakistan. We have the evidence of what goes on in those places. We have very graphic evidence, and we have statistics and we have details from animal welfare groups of what goes on there. This is an opportunity to prevent Irish greyhounds ending up in those places where we know they're not going to be treated properly. And surely difficulties with implementing something is not a reason for it not to be in the first place. We have to try and do our best with what's in a bill, and we have to try our best with implementation. But it has to be in the bill in the first place if it's going to have any sort of a chance. And I think this is an opportunity for us to signal that we are serious about greyhound welfare. because we know what goes on in these places. I mean, I could give you the names of the dogs, the Irish Greyhounds, who've ended up there, but I won't do it at this point. I might save it until we're taking this bill further. But we have the documentary evidence of that. So I'm not making any assumptions or presumptions. I know what's going on. And if we care about greyhounds and their welfare, we will do our best to ensure that they don't end up in those places. And I'm not saying everything is going to be great and this bill is going to do wonders, but it will be signalling that we are serious about welfare of our greyhounds, especially when they're not making any money in Ireland. And it's through the welfare groups that it's now realised that greyhounds make good pets. It wasn't through the greyhound industry, they came on later. Australia has banned the export of greyhounds to China. There are airlines who won't take greyhounds to certain countries, and Ireland is now saying that it's going to be difficult to implement this, therefore we don't do anything to prevent the export. I don't accept that, Chair.
Thanks, Deputy. Minister.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. Just thanks to the committee for actually making the time for us to get this legislation through committee stage. It has been a while, as many of you know, in preparation and getting to this stage where we've navigated through the channel, through first and second stage in the House, and hopefully can get it through and into law as soon as possible, because I think everybody accepts it's well overdue. So just I propose with Deputy Sullivan and her co-proposers of these amendments to address Amendments 1, 5, 6, 10 and 11 regarding the creation of a white list of countries approved for the export of greyhounds and a report on greyhounds exports together. And while I appreciate that the motives of the committee members proposing the amendments are concerned with the welfare of greyhounds, I'm not convinced that the amendments would have the desired effect, even if it was legally possible to ban greyhound exports to certain countries. At the outset, I want to be clear that I'm not here to defend any other country's record on animal welfare. Firstly, the amendments would be unworkable and impossible to enforce. The reality is that the UK is where the majority of greyhounds are exported to. It is not for the Department to police whether greyhounds sent to the UK or any other country are subsequently sent on to a different country. If the Department tried to police whether greyhounds sent abroad were subsequently sent on to another country, all we would do is add bureaucracy on responsible greyhound exporters and owners, but we would fail to stop an unscrupulous exporter who had exported to a country with a problematic welfare record. Setting aside the unworkability of the amendments, there should be no doubt that any legislation banning the export of greyhounds to certain countries would face very significant legal difficulties. The Department did examine this issue, and we sought and obtained legal advice from the Office of the Attorney-General on the Private Members Bill introduced by Deputy Tommy Bruen, which proposed measures very similar to those being discussed here. The advice from the AG is that the Private Members Bill was incompatible with domestic and European law. More importantly, the Deputies and I share the same aim of protecting the welfare of animals despite our differences on the amendments proposed. The Welfare of Greyhounds Act 2011 obliges Bord na Gán to publish a code of practice for the welfare of greyhounds. The primary objective of the code is to set the standards and clearly define what is expected of all individuals engaged in the care and management of registered greyhounds. In this context, the Board proposes to expand the existing code to include provisions with regard to the best practice when exporting greyhounds. Bord na Gán has always made it clear that it only encourages and promotes the export of greyhounds to countries that have established a positive animal welfare code and practices. Bord na Gán is a participant in the International Greyhound Forum, the organisation being proposed in Amendment 1 as a decision maker with regard to the whitelist, and at a recent meeting advised participants that it would engage with and accept input from members of the forum in formulating the expanded code. The Board has informed me that it is fully committed to amending the code, and that work on the expanded code will be finalised when consideration of this bill has been completed. With regard to reporting on exports of greyhounds, it is not currently possible to retrieve the information being requested by the deputies. The traces system used to record the export of canines doesn't differentiate between greyhounds and other dogs. Breed is not a category used in traces for categorising any animals within the same species, so it is not possible to report on greyhounds exported to other countries. So, for this reason, I cannot accept these amendments. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Minister. Okay. Do you want to wish to come back in, Deputy?
No, I just think it's contradicting. It's a contradiction of we either care about the welfare of greyhounds or we don't. And as I said, this is going to be difficult to prevent them being going to certain countries. But Australia can do it. So could we not have a look at how they managed it? Why are we saying that we can't do this? So we are knowingly going to continue to allow greyhounds to be exported to countries where they're going to be abused and they're going to be mistreated, badly treated, and it's going to be left to the welfare groups to try and rescue them, bring them back here and point out how, once again, Ireland has failed on animal welfare.
Just to clarify, we're guided by EU legislation, Chairman. And EU legislation, we're either guided by or abide by the EU legislation, or we don't. There are no airlines currently carrying greyhounds from this country to the countries mentioned where there are questions about the welfare. No airlines travelling directly from Ireland to there.
Thanks, Minister. Okay. How stands the amendment?
I'm pressing the amendment.
You're pressing the amendment.
Yeah.
Okay. On amendment number 1, the question is the amendment be made. Those in favour say aye. Those against say kneel. Kneel. I think the question is lost.
It's lost.
Okay. Do we want the next question? Which one? Okay. 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 That section 2 stands part of the bill. Okay. Is that agreed? Okay. Okay. Move on to section 3. That section 3 stand part of the bill. Section 4. That section 4 stand part of the bill. Section 5. Now that section 5 stand part of the bill. Section 6. That section 6 stands part of the bill. Section 7. That section 7 stands part of the bill.
Agreed.
Section 8. That section 8 stands part of the bill.
Agreed.
Okay. And section 9. There's an amendment from Deputy Cahill. And section amendment 2 to in 4 are inclusive and are related to 3 and 4 are consequential, and 2 to 4 inclusive will be discussed together. Deputy Cahill.
I move, Chairman.
Okay. Do you wish to discuss?
This is the representation on the board.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine, John. But I suppose we were proposing this in that, that various groups would be guaranteed representation on the board. I suppose Horse Racing Ireland have constituted their board in such a manner, and I think it would be of the benefit of the industry if different groups had their voice at the board. As I said earlier, I'm a board member of a private track. The private tracks, would feel at times that they would be being ignored by Board Nagan, and that they would need to have a voice there to ensure that they get fair play. Then you have owners and breeders, obviously, would have their own interests and would be fighting their corner at the board table as well. And at the end of the day, if we haven't got owners and breeders, we have no industry. And they would like to have their own representative at the table as well. And I suppose, after the much publicised sale of Harold's Cross, there has been an increased emphasis on prize money and, trying to increase the profitability of owners and breeders. And again, they would feel that, having their own man on the board would help their cause. And then you have public greyhound trainers then and private greyhound trainers, who I suppose, would both have probably, while they'd have a lot of a shared agenda, they would be coming at it from obviously different commercial places. And public trainers obviously are full time at the business, and have their own owners and would have agenda issues. and private greyhounds would be, you know, I suppose, more of a hobby, or more of a hobby for them, and would probably have a lower grade of dog as well. You know, that mightn't always universally be the case, but in general, private greyhound owners, private greyhound trainers would have a lower grade of dog. And even today, I had representations made to me that, you know, private trainers are finding it increasingly difficult to get regular racing for their dog, and you know that's just one instance where they would feel that they haven't enough voice at the board. So I think, you know, we are increasing the size of the board. It's been increased from 6 to 8 under the terms of this bill. I think it is an opportunity to have a board that has a broad spectrum, and that would have, you know, the various stakeholders in the industry able to voice their opinions at the board table. So it is working well in horse racing in Ireland, where from stable lads to trainers, you know, to breeders, to various sectors of the horse racing industry, horse racing Ireland is well represented across the cross-section. And I think the opportunity is there now for us to do the same in the greyhound industry, and that's why I'm putting forward this amendment, Chairman.
Deputy O'Sullivan.
Yeah, can I just ask, where is the representation on the board? I was just looking at it from greyhound welfare groups or one of those bodies. Are they represented anywhere? I don't see it. Maybe I'm missing it in some of the sections.
Any other members want to raise any particular point before we go to the Minister? Okay, Minister, when you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So I'll take amendments 2, 3 and 4 in relation to membership of the board together, and I'll try and address that specific point, Deputy. In 2014, the then Minister for Agriculture, Food and Marine, Simon Coveney, TD, commissioned the Indicon consultants to carry out a review of Board Nagan. At that time, the board had debts of €23 million, largely due to the investment in Limerick Stadium. That debt has hindered development of the industry ever since. One of the aspects the report examined was the constitution of Board Nagan. The Indicon report was critical of the skill set of the board. It identified a number of skills gaps in the make-up of the board. Principal amongst those was the need for a depth of financial expertise with a requirement for more than one board member with financial qualifications and senior professional experience. While there was an implicit criticism that the lack of skills was a contributory factor to the decision to develop Limerick Stadium without proper capital appraisal and cost-benefit analysis, there was also explicit criticism of the Limerick development and its governance. Indicon stated the following: based on the analysis and documentation available to Indicon, it is hard to conclude anything other than the fact that there was an inadequate appraisal of the Limerick capital investment. The report also identified the requirement for a senior legal professional, a marketing expert and a veterinary expert on the board, which addresses the welfare, that there would be somebody with veterinary expertise. While not entirely in favour of singling out one specific skill to be set down in primary legislation, in view of the animal welfare and integrity of the role of the board, I made a report stage amendment in the Shannon setting down a requirement for veterinary expertise on the board. To return to the Deputy's amendment based on past experience where the board was dominated by industry representatives, I believe that it would be wholly inappropriate for 50% or more of ordinary members to be made up of industry representatives. This amendment totally disregards the recommendations of the Indicon report, and I believe that they would be a totally retrograde step. The industry must change its approach to avoid any danger of that the mistakes of the past would be repeated. I would also like to point out that this is a board that is responsible for regulating the industry, and it will be responsible for drafting regulations to give effect to provisions set out in this bill. It would therefore be totally inappropriate for 50% of the board to be made up of representatives of those to whom those regulations will apply. I do accept, however, that there should be some industry representation on the board, and that is why I made an amendment to allocate one or more places on the board to persons with detailed industry knowledge. This, I believe, will allow for some flexibility while maintaining the balance in favour of a skilled board. I have today announced the appointment of 2 new members to the board, Mr Gary Brown with marketing expertise and the second to Mr Wayne McCarthy with a financial background and a long association with the greyhound sector. Both were selected through the PASS process. In addition, an existing member with significant financial and risk management expertise has been reappointed for a second term. Chairman, thank you.
Deputy Cahill.
First of all, the Indigon was an advisory report that was issued, and you know, it was a recommendations to the industry, and I don't think Indigon has been followed as a Bible by the board up to now. So I don't see why, on the composition of the board, that it evidently hasn't. It hasn't a prescribing authority over this committee here. And I think, you know, the composition of the board that we feel is right, it should be decided here. And to say that, you know, that the mistakes that were made in the past was due to the people was either dog owners or representatives of the tracks that were on the board, I think now is a very misleading statement. You know, there was mistakes made as regards Limerick Track, and I don't think going back over that now is going to solve a lot, because it's fairly historic. But to say that you know, that it was because that there was that the board was composed of people who had an interest in the greyhound industry, I think now would be a misleading statement. And I refer again to Horse Racing Ireland, where, you know, you have from stable lads to trainers to breeders to breeders who are all represented on Horse Racing Ireland. And there's no assertions being made that because the stakeholders are represented on that board, that it is carrying out its duties in a manner that's not for the benefit of the industry. And I think if you neglect to have stakeholders on the board, I think you're going to have a board that will very quickly lose touch with the realities on the ground. And absolutely, I have absolutely no objection to a vet being on the board or a marketing person being on the board, and I think that would be a very good balance. But you know, this bill recommends that 8 people would be on the board. You know, it's still a relatively small board. But I think without representatives of, you know, greyhound owners being assured of a seat at the table, trainers and representatives of the private tracks, I think those stakeholders could very easily become into a position where their voice wouldn't be heard. And you know, you go around the tracks at the moment and people feel their voices haven't been heard. And if we put through this bill is going to frame the industry for the next 20-25 years, hopefully, and will hopefully drive on the industry. I think we'll be wrong if we don't allow stakeholders to have a voice there. And I think stakeholders will resent it if we put forward a board now that's not representative of the industry. And you know, the people who are working in the industry and making a living out of the industry are the ones obviously that want to see it going forward and progressing the most. So I disagree with the Minister, and I will be moving this amendment.
Okay. Thanks, Deputy. Minister, do you want to?
Okay, a couple of points with regard to the Indicon. Actually, there was 27 recommendations, and all have been implemented, which have included the fixing the financial morass that it found itself in, and there are 3 that can be that are being addressed in the current greyhound bill. That's strengthening the board of directors and management, which is the additional appointments as proposed in the bill, and then the Minister to appoint members of a statutory independent greyhound racing control committee and control appeal committee, and regulations and procedures to be introduced to ensure effective enforcement of penalties. All other 24 recommendations under Indicon have actually been implemented. To say that, and I was in this committee when the HRI bill was put through, Horse Racing Ireland bill. Horse Racing Ireland differs from Rossi, Conair or Bordnagon insofar as that it only has a promotional role, that the Turf Club, in their role as the Irish Horse Racing Regulatory Board, carry out the regulatory role for the thoroughbred industry with enforcement through its rules. So the integrity and enforcement distinction is there between HRI and the Turf Club. In this case, they are all under the guise of the one board. With regard to recommendation for the section, there are 8 members plus a chair. The deputy has proposed an additional 4 plus veterinary. We've already provided that there would be at least one or more with an industry knowledge. But just to say that one of the recommendations also was the establishment of a consultative forum, and this has been done. This forum, which can draw in from all stakeholders, meets regularly throughout the year, and reps of the state, are including department officials, the board members and the executive, are all present. Track owners, trainee owners, trainers and owners are all invited, and it's an open forum for discussion of issues directly related with the board. And actually, I was at the award ceremony on Monday night, where it was acknowledged that the board, the forum has met, and there was a general feeling among people there that I gathered that they were actually quite happy with the structure of the forum. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Minister. Okay. On amendment number 2, the question is that amendment be made.
Clarification. My understanding was that these 4 were part of the 8. I didn't understand that we were proposing to increase the size of the board to 12.
No.
The Minister there said these were an additional 4.
No, I didn't. I said that the additional 4, along with the 2 that are already provided for in the legislation, would actually effectively mean at least 6 would be from the industry out of 9.
Sorry, I misheard you.
I didn't say we were proposing it.
Are we all right?
Yeah, sorry.
There is a provision for a vet, isn't there?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
set down
that would represent the welfare issues that I would be concerned about.
It's actually in the primary legislation that one shall be a vet. It's not, it may be, it shall be. It's one of the areas.
Okay.
So I hope that actually addresses Deputy O'Sullivan's question.
Okay. On the amendment number 2, then the question is that the amendment be made. Those in favour say aye.
No.
Those against say Neil. Neil. I think the amendment is lost. Okay. As there is less than the full membership present at the moment, the standing order, we are obliged to wait 8 minutes until the full membership is present, whichever is the area before proceedings can take division. Before the proceedings can take the division. When the 8 minutes have elapsed, the full membership is present, whichever is the area, we'll proceed with the vote. and division will be taken. On the question that the amendment be made, division has been challenged, and pursuant to our standing orders, division will now be taken by the Clerk of the Committee.
Deputy Jackie Cahill. Deputy Marcella Corcoran Kennedy. Deputy Pat Deering.
Neil.
Deputy Andrew Dial, Minister of State. Deputy Martin Kenny, he's absent. Deputy Bobby Ayrord.
Tom.
Deputy Willie Penrose.
Neil.
Deputy Maureen O'Sullivan.
Neil.
So the result is Tá 2, Neil 5. So the amendment is lost. Okay.
3 and 4.
So, okay, which means now that amendments 3 and 4 cannot be moved. Okay. So, down here now. Okay. So is it agreed that section 9 now stands part of the bill? Okay. Moving on to section 10. That section 10 stands part of the bill. Section 11. That section 11 stands part of the bill. Section 12. That section 12 stands part of the bill.
Agreed.
Section 13. That section 13 stands part of the bill.
Agreed.
Section 14. That section 14 stands part of the bill.
Agreed.
Section 15. That section 15 stands part of the bill.
Agreed.
Section 16. And section 16 stands part of the bill.
Agreed.
Section 17. And section 17 stands part of the bill.
Agreed.
Section 18 stands part of the bill.
Agreed.
Section 19. And section 19 stands part of the bill.
Agreed.
Section 20. The section 20 stands part of the bill.
Agreed.
Section 21. The section 21 stands part of the bill.
Agreed.
Section 22. The section 22 stands part of the bill.
Agreed.
Section 23. The section 23 stands part of the bill.
Agreed.
Section 24. The section 24 stands part of the bill.
Agreed.
Section 25. The section 25 stands part of the bill.
Agreed.
And section 26 now, we have amendment number 5, which has already been discussed with amendment 1. How stands the amendment number 5?
It stands.
You're pressing it?
Press, yeah.
Okay. On amendment number 5, the question is the amendment be made. Those in favour say Tá.
Oh.
Sorry. Sorry. Does the new section be inserted? Those in favour say Tá.
Oh.
Those in favour say Neil.
Against.
Sorry. I think the question is lost. Okay. Amendment number 6 is a new section already discussed with 1. The new section be inserted. How stands the amendment?
Stands.
Okay. Those in favour say Tá.
Oh.
Those against, Neil.
Neil.
I think the question is lost. Okay. Amendment number 7 and 7 and 8 are related and will be discussed together. Deputy Cahill.
I press, Chairman.
Okay. Do you wish to discuss? You're moving the amendment, I presume?
Yeah, I'm moving the amendment, Chairman. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just move the amendment, yeah.
Okay. Do you wish to discuss?
No, unless the minister.
You okay?
Unless the minister has something to say against it.
Okay. Minister?
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So I'm addressing, proposed to speak to amendments 7 and 8 in relation to artificial insemination together. Is that okay?
Yep.
Section 26 sets down the enabling provisions which allow Oireachtas to make regulations with respect to the artificial insemination of greyhounds. It is a recasting of existing provisions in Section 39 of the 1958 Act related to artificial insemination Amendment 7 seeks to include natural service as part of artificial insemination when this is not the case. It is not appropriate to have a reference to natural service under this heading, as Section 26 clearly addresses artificial insemination only. Natural service does not require regulation to the same degree as it is a natural process. So I cannot accept this amendment. Amendment 8 seeks to set down in primary legislation the maximum percentage of semen derived from deceased greyhound sires used in breeding. Such detail is more appropriate to secondary legislation, where it can be changed more easily to reflect changing circumstances. Section 26, subsection 1 of the bill allows the Board to make regulations with the consent of the Minister, setting down in secondary legislation precisely the type of restriction being proposed by the Deputy in Amendment 8. Just to repeat that, it sets down in secondary legislation precisely the type of restriction being proposed by the Deputy in Amendment 8. Therefore, I cannot accept this amendment either.
Okay. Deputy Cahill, do you wish to respond?
Yeah, so just a few I just want a few points of clarification through the chair to the Minister. What you're saying is that it isn't appropriate to have regulation as regards natural mating in with artificial insemination. So would you? I suppose what I would be saying is it advisable in the bill to have a separate section then to deal with, because we're talking about animal welfare here and animals that know the industry. Natural mating can have welfare issues. So it seems strange to me that we have regulation just covering one section of matings, and we have frozen semen and we have natural matings where we're not going to have regulation in the bill. So are you saying that if you're saying that it's not appropriate to have them grouped together, would it be more appropriate then that we have a section govern each? There's 3 different forms of mating. Are you saying that we should have legislation in a section of the bill covering all 3?
Are you ready?
Yeah. But your question is that we have a section dealing with artificial insemination.
Yeah,
We have one in Section 26 that deals with artificial insemination. Anyway.
Yeah, but you have no legislation governing natural mating or using frozen semen.
Well, in the Welfare of Greyhounds Act 2011, Section 29 relates to the welfare of greyhounds, provided only progeny in compliance with 2 and 3 of the Welfare of Greyhounds Act. That's for the 1st to the 6th litter or 7th and 8th following certification are permitted to be registered in the Irish Greyhound Stud Book, and makes it an offence for a person to attempt to register litters. So it's covered under natural mating. I mean, I'm slightly. What we've tried to set out here is this isn't a welfare bill, but what we're trying to do is set out the rules.
But Minister, with respect, you're putting in regulations as regards artificial insemination, but that covers a certain percentage of the breeding industry. But we also have natural insemination, and we have frozen semen being used for insemination.
But that's not natural.
No, but either is artificial insemination.
Yeah.
But why not? Why shouldn't the bill cover all 3 types of breeding?
Well, there's no demand for. I mean,
well, if you talk to stud owners, they wouldn't tell you that, Minister. Like natural matings, in my view, natural matings are a thing of the past in the greyhound industry. They don't happen, and they don't happen. So you have artificial insemination and you have frozen semen being used, which is usually done with an insert. And we have no regulation here going into the bill. I think that's a mistake. I'm not arguing with the regulation that's on artificial insemination, but I can't know why we have just regulation governing one aspect and not regulations governing others. Like we have a VIT that comes into studs and makes sure that the artificial insemination is done to the highest standards. I accept that fully. I'm not arguing that point at all. But then if we have frozen semen being used, or if there's natural matings, there's no provision for veterinary supervision on either of those. I just can't understand when we're doing a bill that we don't have the regulations governing all three types.
Section 26 in this bill deals with the artificial insemination of greyhounds. Frozen semen is covered in the same way that natural mating is covered under veterinary controls, and it's dealt with in this other piece of legislation as well, as I understand it.
But surely, Minister, this is the bill for the industry going forward. And why put in regulations here on artificial insemination and not do it for other forms?
Is this about? Is your thing here about dead dog, deceased?
No. Like frozen semen can be used from a live sire as well. Like the reality is, natural matings out on the ground are not happening. Natural matings happen, I'd say, in a very small percentage of cases now. But even if they are happening, I can't see why, if we're putting regulations in as regards artificial insemination, we won't do it for other forms.
Yeah, but sorry, just in the 1958 Act, we're amending the 1958 legislation here, and the 1958 legislation didn't mention natural mating, natural service.
In fairness, Minister, things have moved on an awful lot.
But it didn't mention it.
Yeah, but in 1958 there was only one way that you'd get a bitch and pup. There was no other way. So, like, we have moved on a long way from that now, Minister, now in fairness. And I'm not trying to be awkward here, but I can't understand when there is other methods of getting a bitch and pup that the legislation isn't, that we're doing this bill now for the industry for the next 20 or 30 years. And why have we veterinary supervision over artificial insemination? And we haven't got it over if frozen semen is being used. And the same if a natural mating is occurring. Like we have said earlier this evening about animal welfare, and I accept that this bill isn't all about welfare, but still we have to recognise welfare and welfare issues. Yeah. And like if there's natural matings going on in the place, we're saying that if it can't go in to supervise that that's been done correctly. Like I just can't see why we won't have a bill that's inclusive of all forms of mating.
You're suggesting that there should be a veterinary control over natural matings?
And veterinary supervision. And like if a vet is able to go into a stud where there's artificial insemination going on and examine that has been done correctly, which I have no objection to, that's the way it should be. If there's natural matings occurring, why shouldn't he be able to walk in and see that it's been done correctly as well?
I don't see the need for that. It's a natural process.
No. But you said natural process, yeah. Yeah, but you have to make sure that it's done to proper welfare standards.
Sex education.
Well,
and frozen semen as well. Frozen semen isn't being covered here.
Just so as we're clear on this, I mean, you drew in a comparison with the horse industry earlier. To the best of my knowledge, that coverings, which are much more common and in thoroughbreds are the only way that animals are covered, there is no need for a veterinary. There's no legal requirement for veterinary presence to supervise that process.
Yeah, but artificial insemination doesn't happen in the horse in the thoroughbred industry anyway. It doesn't.
No, but you're talking about natural.
But I'm saying, why are you putting in? You have veterinary supervision for one aspect. How many? Have you the percentage of matings that's natural at the moment of breeding? Have you the percentage?
I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you it is very small, Minister. But like, why not? We're doing a bill here now, and we're leaving frozen semen outside the equation in this bill. We're catering for artificial insemination, but we're not catering for frozen semen. I don't think that's a level playing pitch for the people who are doing artificial insemination. And I'm not saying there's anything been done wrong, but why not have veterinary supervision in the bill for all aspects of it?
Artificial insemination. Sorry, frozen semen is artificial insemination. But
that wouldn't be clear in the bill now, Minister, in fairness.
Well, like
they're two
Section 26.
They're done differently now, Minister. They're done differently now. Well, they're two different processes. Well, at the moment in a stud, there's no supervision, veterinary supervision over frozen semen.
Just to clarify, I mean, those of us, and you are indeed yourself, and a farmer who has probably used artificial insemination available to the service for bovines, that comes in a frozen canister, and it's administered through a process where any of us that are involved in agriculture farming are familiar with. But the use of frozen semen is artificial insemination. There's a distinction.
Can we include that in the wording, so, Minister?
The measures controlling the use of semen. Yeah, it uses the word semen. Yeah, but it uses the word for the use of semen. I mean, artificial insemination for semen has to be partially chilled or frozen anyway, whether it's...
At the moment, the people, if you're using frozen semen, there's no veterinary supervision on it at the moment. Where there is, if it is what we call ordinary AI. Where semen, like in some cases, semen is stored for a long period of time before it is used.
Yeah.
In other cases, the semen is drawn fresh and used fresh. There's veterinary supervision over the fresh, but there's not over frozen.
Back to my opening, my original statement on this, and when I said Section 26, Section 1 of the bill allows for the board to make regulations with the consent of the minister, setting down in secondary legislation that precise type of distinction or restriction. So, like we in the legislation, it's called artificial insemination, and you're explaining that there's a difference between that and frozen semen. There may well be, at some stage, another process that will evolve, but it comes on that's not natural. But it could be chilled semen. I'm not saying it will be, but it could be. So, in actual fact, what we're doing here is providing under subsection 1 of Section 26, subsection 1, the enabling power to the board, with the consent of the minister, to lay down in secondary legislation details covering what may be evolving science or techniques or whatever. It's a complex area that we're making something complicated that actually the phrase or the description of artificial insemination catches all of them, but there may well be a time in time evolving technology which would be nailed down in primary legislation with no ability to amend it through secondary legislation to reflect changes in advances or whatever. So I think the
word needs to be modified to be more inclusive.
But artificial insemination, it's all artificial.
But at the moment, I think you're missing the point. I mean, at the moment, Minister, a vet can go into a stud for artificial insemination where there's fresh semen, but he has no authority to, at the moment, under legislation, where there's frozen semen being used. And all I'm saying is that
the legislation allows for secondary legislation to specify that, as it stands. It's there.
But why don't we do it in the primary legislation?
Because, as I've said, you may then just have fresh semen and frozen semen. Who says if there's something else comes in later, it's not provided for? So what? If you look at Section 26 ABC, H, is it? H? Yes. Setting the standards and... the board may, with the consent of the minister, make regulations controlling the practice of artificial insemination of greyhounds in relation to the following. And if you go down to H, it says setting the standards and procedures to be followed by veterinary practitioners and for the standards and procedure to be observed at such centres and for such inseminations. It goes on. I mean, there's a...
The point I'm making, Minister, now maybe I'm not making it clear enough. Maybe it's my fault.
setting the maximum number of registered services by insemination of greyhounds permissible during the specified time period, either generally in relation to the greyhound sires or in relation to the classes of greyhound sires or individual greyhound sires. So this is broad. Section 26 deals with the broadest, in the broadest terms possible, dealing with the whole area of artificial insemination of greyhounds, and allows for secondary legislation to be made in a host of areas, actually, that are all encompassing. So I think, I mean, I take the Deputy's point that what we're trying to do is make sure that there's nothing left out, but nothing is left out, because frozen semen is artificial insemination, no matter what way you look at it. It's not natural, so it has to be artificial.
But the point I'm making at the moment, Minister, is the legislation that's in place and that a vet goes into a stud, he has no place in observing the use of frozen.
He can under secondary legislation.
That's not happening in practice.
In secondary legislation, the board can request that, and we have already set out in an earlier section the need to have a veterinary practitioner on the board, and in consultation with the forum and with the board, if that's deemed necessary, the board then can set out in secondary legislation with the consent of the Minister to make those sort of provisions.
I just can't.
And it can also, in A, is the prohibiting of persons from engaging in the practice of artificial insemination of greyhounds except under and in accordance with the licences granted by the board under regulations, i.e. secondary legislation, made under this section.
I can't understand why there's such a reluctance to broaden the wording as regards.
You know, you're trying to narrow it down, Deputy. No, yes, you are. No. Yes, you are. You're trying to limit rather than expand here. That's what you're doing.
I'm trying to do these opposite, Minister.
No, I disagree. I'm sorry.
You're narrowing it, because at the moment, veterinary practitioners have no place to play where frozen semen is being used. They have no place to play. And you're bringing in a bill that's copying the legislation that's in place. I'm trying to make them more encompassing, that all matings are governed with legislation. 'Tis your narrowing it, Minister. You mightn't be understanding what I'm saying.
No, I do understand.
You're not understanding, Minister, because if you did, you would broaden the terminology to govern what's happening at the moment. How many inseminations at the moment? What percentage is used with frozen semen?
Sorry?
What percentage is...
I don't have that information.
Yeah, well...
You don't either, I'd say.
Well, it's significantly more than what's done with artificial insemination.
But you've just contradicted yourself. Frozen is artificial insemination.
No, but Minister...
It's not natural.
But, Minister, I don't want to go down to the line confrontation line that you've gone.
You've drawn the distinction between... You've just implied there that the use of frozen semen is natural. That's what you've just implied there.
Oh, but Minister, if I have, you're definitely not hearing me. I'm not saying anything of the sort.
Well, you distinguished between it and artificial.
What I'm saying, what's happening in practice out of the government, Minister, maybe you don't know what's happening in the industry, but frozen semen at the moment has no veterinary supervision over it. That's what's happening at the moment. That's what I want to rectify in this bill. At the moment, artificial insemination has veterinary supervision, but use of frozen semen hasn't. And you're putting in a bill that's allowing that to continue. So how you can say that I'm narrowing it, I just can't understand. I want that where... Sorry, with due respect... I want a legislation that does veterinary supervision over if it is needed for any circumstances in a stud, that if a vet walks in, that he has access to what's done as regards all inseminations.
Yeah. Minister?
Like, there's, as I understand it, there's fresh, chilled, frozen semen is sort of the terms generally used. What the Deputy said was that we were allowing a bill that dealt with artificial insemination but not frozen. That's why I said that he was drawing a distinction and implying that the use of frozen semen wasn't artificial insemination. It is. And this bill and this section allows for the broadest possible the definition of what is artificial insemination. It includes frozen semen. It can be provided for in secondary legislation.
Can you show me where in the bill that it mentions the word frozen?
It says artificial. It doesn't mention fresh. It doesn't mention chilled. It doesn't mention frozen. It says artificial. It's as simple as that. All of those
Can you
system.
Can you explain
methods.
at the moment, then, Minister, why the use of frozen semen hasn't got veterinary supervision over it?
Because it's not laid down in secondary legislation, but it can be under this bill.
But why not do it?
Because it can be done.
But why not do it?
It's more appropriate to secondary legislation.
Well, I'd have to admit I'm not qualified to answer that, so I won't, but I can't see why.
It would be normal to allow flexibility under every sector. That's why we very rarely put in shall, we put in may, as Deputy Sullivan earlier was making a point about whitelist, that they allow countries that might get their welfare standards, that they could come onto it in your proposal earlier. So it is that you allow as much flexibility. This bill sets down general broad principles and provisions, and then it is up to a board with advice from in consent with the Minister, but with advice from the experts, be that members of the board, be that members of the consultative forum, be that the veterinary practitioner, or and indeed people from the welfare position. So we have in the Welfare Act restrictions on the number of litters that can, from any animal that can be registered under this in the stud book. So what this, if you look at section 26A to M, I think it is, or O, sorry, O, it allows for a range of different provisions to be made under regulation, which is secondary legislation.
Okay, Chair. I'm after arguing this long enough.
There's no welfare, no welfare issue here.
Okay, I think we've heard both sides of the argument.
I reserve my position on this. That I'll probably bring this amendment forward again at a later stage.
Okay. On amendment number 7, the question is that the amendment be made. Those in favour say aye.
Sorry, I thought
you want to withdraw the amendment then at this stage?
I'll withdraw it at this stage. Look,
Okay.
there's a difference of opinion between myself and the Minister on this. And I'll go back and we can see, can we get clarity and get. I think I can't understand why we can't get an agreed position on it. But look, I've argued it long enough. I'm not going to delay.
Okay, withdraw the amendment at this stage. All right.
At this stage, yeah.
Okay. Amendment 8 then is already discussed with Amendment 7. How stands Amendment 8? Are you moving Amendment 8, Deputy Cahill?
Yes. Press President. Yeah.
On Amendment 8, the question is that the amendment be made. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against say Neil. Neil. I think the question is lost. Okay. That's section 26 then, start part of the bill. Is that agreed? Okay. Section 27, amendment number 9. Deputy Cahill. Okay. You're moving the amendment then, Deputy. Do you want to speak on the amendment at the moment?
No. Okay.
Okay. Minister, do you want to?
Thank you, Chairman. Just regard to Amendment 9, the amendment being proposed requires the Minister to report to the Houses of the Oireachtas on racing sanctions imposed by the Control Committee and the Appeal Committee for breaches of substance regulations in the previous calendar year. Section 44, subsection 20 and section 49, subsection 6 set down provisions in relation to the publication of all decisions of the Control and Appeal Committee in relation to all types of breaches of regulations under their jurisdiction, and not simply breaches of substance regulations. All the decisions of these committees will be published on both the Board's website and in the sporting press as they are currently. So I can see no merit in the publication of a report as set down in the amendment. It would place an extra and unnecessary administrative burden on the Board and the Minister without adding to the sum of knowledge already in the public domain, and for this reason I cannot accept this amendment. And just to say that it is possible at any stage for the Board to be summoned in and on foot of that that information to this. Probably this committee would be the appropriate committee at any stage at the committee's request.
Next Minister, Deputy Cahill, do you want to respond?
No, I accept that explanation. That's okay.
So you withdraw the amendment? Okay. That's section 29 is then part of the bill. Is that agreed? 27. All right. Section 28 now. That's section 28 is then part of the bill. Is that agreed? Section 29. Section 29 is then part of the bill.
Agreed.
Okay, we're on to section 30 now. Amendment number 10, Deputy O'Sullivan, Pringle, Wallace and Daly. It's a new section. It's already discussed with Amendment 1. How stands the Amendment 10?
I press the amendment.
Present. Okay. That on Amendment number 10, the question is that the new section be inserted. Those in favour, say tall.
Tall.
Those against, say Neil. Neil. I think the question is lost. Okay. That section 30 then is then part of the bill. Is that agreed? Okay. Section 31 now is amendment number 11. Deputies O'Sullivan, Pringle, Wallace and Daly. It's already discussed with Amendment 1. How stands Amendment 11?
Stands. Press.
President. Okay. On question 11, the question is that the amendment number 11 is as a new section. Those in favour say tall.
Tall.
Those against say Neil. I think the question is lost.
Vote tall.
Okay, vote tall. Section 36, Section 36 stands part of the bill. Section 37, Section 37 stand part of the bill. Section 38, Section 38 stand part of the bill. Section 39, Section 39 stand part of the bill. Section 40, Section 40 stand part of the bill. Section 41, Section 41 stand part of the bill.
Agreed.
Section 42, Section 42 stand part of the bill.
Agreed.
Section 43, Section 43 stand part of the bill. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Section 44, Section 44 stand part of the bill. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Section 45, Is it agreed that section 45 stand part of the bill?
Agreed.
Section 46. Is it agreed that section 46 stand part of the bill?
Agreed.
Voting.
Many more sections, is there?
We're nearly there.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of the procedure going through it here at the minute. There's no more further amendment. Just give us five minutes, I'd say. Section 47. Is section 47 stand part of the bill?
Agreed.
Section 48. Is section 48 stand part of the bill? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Is section 49 stand part of the bill? Is that agreed? Section 50. Is section 50 stand part of the bill? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Section 51. Is section 51 stand part of the bill?
Agreed.
Is agreed. Section 52. Is section 52 stand part of the bill? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Section 53. Is agreed that section 53 stand part of the bill?
Agreed.
Is it agreed that section 54 stand part of the bill?
Agreed.
Is it agreed that section 55 stand part of the bill?
Agreed.
Is it agreed that section 56 stand part of the bill?
Agreed.
Is it agreed that section 57 stand part of the bill?
Agreed.
Is it agreed that section 58 stand part of the bill?
Agreed.
Is it agreed that section 59 stand part of the bill?
Agreed.
Is it agreed that section 60 stand part of the bill?
Agreed.
Is it agreed that section 61 stand part of the bill?
Agreed.
Is it agreed that section 62 stand part of the bill?
Agreed.
Is it agreed that section 63 stand part of the bill?
Agreed.
Is it agreed that section 64 stand part of the bill?
Agreed.
Is it agreed that section 65 stand part of the bill?
Agreed.
Is it agreed that section 66 stand part of the bill?
Agreed.
This is the title of the bill, that an act to be amended extends the Greyhound Industry Act 1958 to 1993, the Welfare of Greyhounds Act 2011, Animal Welfare Act 2013 to change the name of Board and Gun and to provide for related matters. Is that agreed? Thank you. In accordance with Standing Order number 90, the following message will be sent to Clerk Dole: that the Select Committee of Agriculture, Food and Marine has completed its consideration of the Greyhound Racing Bill 2018 and no amendments have been made thereto. I would like to thank Minister Doyle and his officials for coming here today and going through the bill as efficiently as possible. The meeting is adjourned. There's no further business. The meeting is adjourned until next Tuesday, the 2nd of April at 6:30 p.m. when we deal with the estimates.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much.